Faust aux Enfers releases The Damnation of Faust in the US and The Condemnation of Faust in the UK, is a French occult trick film written, directed, and edited by Georges Méliès. Released in 1903, it stars Méliès as Mephistopheles, with the rest of the cast going uncredited, as was common for the time. At 6 minutes and 34 seconds, it's silent, and I would classify it as appropriate for ages 10 and up due to some mildly intense themes. This film is one of countless adaptations of the classic German folktale Faust. The earliest recorded version of this story can be found in the 1587 chapbook Historia von die Johann Faustin by an anonymous German author. It follows the fictionalized life story of the German alchemist and magician, Johann Georg Faust, and his deal with the demon Mephistopheles, in which he trades his mortal soul for infinite knowledge and worldly pleasure. Designed to warn readers that no material pursuit is worthy of damnation, the story gained a large portion of its fame after being adapted to the stage. It was brought to English-speaking audiences in 1592 by the English playwright Christopher Marlowe, who adapted it into his play, The Tragical History of the Life and Death of Dr. Faustus. But it wasn't until Johann Wolfgang von Goethe adapted it into his two-part play Faust between 1808 and 1831 that it gained true international fame. The story is now so influential that it has been adapted and reimagined across basically every conceivable medium, and even led to the coining of the phrase Faustian bargain, which refers to any deal with an evil entity that comes at a great cost. Méliès's adaptation was most inspired by French composer Hector Berlioz's 1846 composition, The Damnation of Faust, and was actually Méliès's third attempt at tackling the story. Sadly, copies of his two prior adaptations, 1897's Faust and Marguerite and 1898's Damnation of Faust, have never been found in full. While all of this background is widely available, we know very little about the actual production of The Damnation of Faust. We do know it was likely filmed at Méliès's home studio outside of Paris and was released by his production company, Star Film Company. Méliès would have also worked, at least in part, on the design and creation of the film's sets, costumes, and special effects, the latter of which included pyrotechnics, dissolves, puppetry, and stage mechanics. Most notable of these mechanics were the ones employed to roll and lift the painted backgrounds, creating the illusion, when coupled with dissolves, that the characters were moving through hell. This was born of practical necessity, as the immense weight of film cameras at the time would have prevented Méliès from physically tracking actors across different sets. The plot here is very simple. Mephistopheles drags Faust through hell, frightening him with fire, demons, and, confusingly, ballet? This film is a very mixed bag for me. As an adaptation of Faust, it is a near total failure, completely omitting Faust's characterization, bargain with Mephistopheles, and ultimate downfall, choosing instead to only focus on his descent into hell with virtually no backstory or lead-up. If a viewer were not familiar with the story of Faust, this film would not enlighten them. But how is it as its own story, inspired by, but largely independent of the source material? Well, it's still not great. We don't have any clear context as to why Faust is being taken to hell by Mephistopheles, and the characters are not given any real depth beyond this demon is having a great time tormenting a man who, I suppose, is afraid. Even worse than just being shallow, though, the film is also confusing, with unnecessary and tonally dissonant dance sequences, none of which are executed with much skill. These people are clearly not ballerinas. So you might be thinking it sounds like I borderline hate this film. Hollow story, nothing characters, bad choreography. And I think I would if it weren't for the genuinely awesome sets and special effects. These are the only two things keeping this film afloat. And when it comes to trick films, that's almost enough. In fact, I really adored these sets. The number of them, the detail work, the water, and most of all the movement. Méliès' idea to move parts of the set to make the viewers feel as though the characters are moving was genius, as was his idea to vertically slide the background behind Faust and Mephistopheles while they're floating downward. It really does lend a grand sense of space and movement to the film. The effects are also spot on, with the dissolves further enhancing the moving backgrounds, and the superimposition adding a weird surrealism to everything. The wirework and pyrotechnics are very sound, and I would be remiss if I did not mention the really funny demon puppet. I love him, he is so silly. Additionally, the costumes and makeup are fine, if a little unmemorable and sometimes reused from prior films. Overall, in my opinion, the film's technical aspects are its only real draw. This is not essential viewing for Faust fans. It doesn't do justice to its source material, nor does it do anything new with the story on its own. In parts, it even drags despite its short length. So I am going to give The Damnation of Faust a 1.5 out of 5. I really can only recommend it to people like me who are also interested in sets and early special effects. A Catastrophe in Hester Street is a possibly American horror comedy trick film whose cast and crew are all unknown. Released in either 1903 or 1904, it is 2 minutes and 16 seconds long and silent. I would classify it as appropriate for audiences 12 and up due to violence. We know virtually nothing about the making of this movie. I have not been able to locate any information on its production or cultural context. I can't find out if it was part of a larger film. There's no theories on who directed it. No one talks about this movie. What we do know is the depictions of violence this graphic were notably uncommon in this era, save for a few exceptions, like 1895's The Execution of Mary by Alfred Clark, which very briefly depicts Mary Queen of Scots being decapitated. There's also a 1900 film that I missed, by Alice Guy Blaché, that I may revisit later, titled Turn of the Century Surgery. Otherwise, though, things like maimings just weren't a big part of cinema yet. After leaving work one day, two men decide to leave cases of dynamite and nitro powder outside of a pub under the supervision of a fruit vendor. The vendor, clearly not recognizing how dangerous the materials are, proceeds to sit on them. When the workers return, they drunkenly drop the dynamite, causing a massive explosion that destroys the bar and blows the vendor into the sky. When he falls back to Earth, he's missing an arm, and a policeman unsuccessfully searches for it, attempting to reattach someone else's blown-off leg in its place. I find this film fascinating. It's brief and centered around spectacle, but it still manages to tell a little story and deliver some pretty dark comedy. I know that this kind of over-the-top violence would, in a few short decades, be very normalized in things like cartoons, but for the time being, it was pretty out there for the screen. On top of that, there's a brief flicker of realism that makes it all kind of unsettling, namely when the police officer first rolls over the vendor in the wake of the accident, the man's clothing tattered and arm gone. It's grim. Even though it gets more farcical once he's standing, there's still something disturbing about his wounded days. On a technical level, the film is solid. The way they used special effects to create the illusion of an explosion was really creative. Smoke for the explosion itself, yanking a dummy up by wires to make it look like the vendor was sent flying, and a substitution splice inserted to simulate the destruction of the pub. The set was probably the best part. Before the accident, it's well lit, and has fake glare and reflections added to the windows to make it feel like we're actually outside. And after the accident, its destruction is wonderful. There's burn marks on the door and shattered windows, the lemon cart is mangled, and debris falls from above. There's a level of attention to detail that makes me wonder if this was part of a larger project. and also makes me sad that I don't know the names of the people who worked on it. And that goes for the cast as well as the crew. They deliver good silent comedy with what little time they have. The workers portraying irresponsibility and drunkenness well, and the policeman just being funny with the sincerity behind his ludicrous actions. It all just comes together in a clip that makes me wish there was more. Overall, I am going to give A Catastrophe in Hester Street a 3.5 out of 5. It's worth a little watch even though it's super short and you can't find a copy of it without text overlay. That URL doesn't even lead to it on the stock footage website, by the way, and the film is over 100 years old and public domain, so don't pay for it. Anyways, I recommend this to anyone with an interest in special effects or just silly yet dark comedy. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I really appreciate it. I just want to say that while I know I shared my 1900s review lineup in my video for Summoning the Spirits, I've actually added quite a few films recently after doing further research, as you may have noticed with this video. I was originally going to be reviewing The Damnation of Faust and the Black Imp here. I do believe that my new lineup is now set in stone though, so I can say my next video is going to cover the British ghost trick film, The Mistletoe Bough, and the French horror comedy trick film, The Black Imp. If you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would be very appreciated, and you can follow me on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram at Under the Fleapit. If you like what I do and you want to support the channel, my Patreon and Ko-fi are both linked in the description. Until next time, this has been Under the Fleapit. Stay spooky!